Hi, and welcome to American Utopia, a conversation with David Byrne and Maira Kalman, presented by the Museum of the City of New York. I'm Whitney Donhauser, the museum's Ronay Menschel Director and President. We are honored to be joined by David Byrne and Maira Kalman, two longtime New Yorkers who both contributed to the vibrancy of this city. We are particularly pleased about tonight's program, not only because Maira and David are both talented, creative members of New York's arts and culture scene, but also because later this spring, the museum will be exploring the music scene of the 1980s in our New York New Sound exhibition, where the Talking Heads will be included. But for tonight, Maira and David will be joined by the veteran journalist Alison Stewart of WNYC shortly to talk about their long and varied careers and also reflect a little bit on current moments here in the city. I'd like to give a big shout out and thank you to Marie Kuhlman, Senior Director of Publicity for Bloomsbury Press, for making this program possible. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with David and Maira's work already, but most recently, they've collaborated on a book adaptation of David's award-winning Broadway show, American Utopia, which recently premiered as an HBO special directed by Spike Lee. So those of you who don't already own the book, we invite you to support the museum by purchasing it tonight through our shop. So you can click through in the link in the chat in order to purchase it, and we're also offering a 15% discount. But before we get started, just a few notes about logistics. We will be taking questions from the audience throughout the whole program via the question function. We are not going to be using the hand raising function. And of course, we'll try to get as many of your questions in as possible. So we'll do what we can do. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. David Byrne was born in Scotland in 1952, and he's now an artist, writer, and musician who since 1974 has lived in New York City. He has a daughter and a grandson. Maira Kalman was born in Tel Aviv in 1949, and she's now an artist, writer, and designer who since 1954 has lived in New York City. She has a daughter, a son, and two grandchildren. Alison Stewart is the host of All of It with Alison Stewart on WNYC. She's also the host of the monthly book club Get Lit with All of It, which is a partnership with New York Public Library. So now, thank you again for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Alison. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Whitney. So this would be the part of the program, hopefully David and Maira will jump on real soon. This part of the program when I would, if we were all together in some big auditorium, I'd say, how many of you have seen American Utopia in the theater? And everybody would raise their hand. And I'd say, how many of you have seen it on HBO? And a whole bunch of other people raise their hand. How many of you have the book? And then everybody would raise their hand. It would be very exciting. So I'm just going to imagine that we're all, people across New York City who are watching today are raising their hands because they've done one, two, or all three of those things. Let's bring on our speakers for the evening, David Byrne and Maira Kalman. There they are.
I think I have done it. I've done it.
Hi. So I thought the way we talk conversation would go is we talk about New York a little bit first, because you're New Yorkers, we're all New Yorkers. Talk a little bit about collaboration, about the book and the show, and then maybe this much on the political landscape, because today was kind of crazy. Maira and David, you lived near each other, I think across from each other